address you and it'll give you an opportunity to ask questions. So, Captain, it's all yours.
Yes,
carry on.
I'm here. All right.
One second. Let's someone look at the
triggering.
boombox. Where is it?
Where is it? Right. And I'm gonna share my screen as well.
You can't hear. So we're gonna go through runs and responsibilities. Take notes. Runs and responsibilities. Walk the back door. Tell him to walk the back door.
Let me double check.
Sorry about that.
Aha. Good.
Listen, I don't want to hear anyone talking. Let me go play books open, but you don't want anyone talking.
So
I told them get their books, but you know.
All right, understood. It's a good bunch to cover tonight.
We're getting a bigger sound system.
Okay.
Someone went for it. So when they return, we can hear much better. But now they can't hear so well because of the over projector speaker is very low.
Okay. All right. And as I said, I'd share the link so that they can log in. They could actually, when they ask questions, I could hear them easier.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Right.
All right. So everyone, you take notes. You can use your phone, take pictures. And please waiting for a long time.
Oh, there it is. 2 participants. And going there. Going there.
Okay, well, the boombox is now coming up.
All right, let's say when.
Yeah, the same one we had last night. So you know what to do, right? Sorry. That's all. All the next years, are they coming?
Here we go. All right, I'm not hearing you. I can see that you're saying something, but I'm not hearing you. I hope you're hearing me. No, it's not your proximity to the microphone. There's nothing coming across at all. Right.
Can you
No,
hear-
right. Your signal is coming in and out.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, there was some background noise coming from your section.
That would be my son.
Okay.
He's moving out shortly.
Okay. So now you can hear me clearly, right?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay.
Except for some rumbling from the room, but that's all right.
Okay, thank you very much. So now, so everyone is seated.
And again, if you want to ask questions, they can type it in the chat. That would be good.
Yes, okay. All right, so there's two ways to ask questions. You can come speak loud or you can type in the chat. Okay?
Yeah,
All right,
because I really want.
Whenever you're ready.
Want to ask us. All right, ready?
Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. For those of you who were not at the previous session, I am JCCF 7545 Captain Kiffer A. Davis, and I'll be your instructor for the next 45 minutes. Tonight, we'll be looking at ranks and responsibilities, duties within the service. I'm going to be basing the bulk of the content of tonight's presentation will be on the ranks that are common to the Commonwealth. Caribbean territories are members of the British Commonwealth, and the rank structure remains generic. And that is why I'll be using that as the basis. And I'll be drawing references also from the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force, where I serve. And I'm looking forward to seeing you and meeting you in person when you get here for Caribbean Cadet Camp 2023. So ranks and responsibilities. As again I mentioned, I would love for this to be as interactive as possible. So please ask your questions, and I will be asking you questions. Captain, did we send the link to them?
Yes. I'll ensure they all, yeah, send the link. One point, would love to record this communication. Can you give us-
Second. All right, so I'm not hearing, but I'm reading lips, and I guess you're asking about recording.
Yes, we need your permission.
I'm actually streaming.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
So the presentation will be shared later on. But I can also give you co-host so you can do your local recording as well. Let me make you co-host so you can record locally to your drive. It's always good to have a backup plan. Always good. So I've made you co-host so you can record from your end. And as I said, it's also streaming. So that's another source of recording. There we go. Lovely. So rank.
One moment, Captain. So for those of us, we have the link to send to those who are not here. But those who are here want the link. I'll send you also, so you can send messages to him, communication, ask questions, right? So I'll give you, they don't have a link. Okay, I'll give them also. All
right. Is everybody hearing me? If you're hearing me, raise your hand. All right, I'm seeing hands go up around the room. Well done. So I would love to start off. I love to start off by getting an idea of where you are, what you understand. So let me ask this question: what is a rank? Somebody quickly tell me, what is a rank? We're gonna start by disassembling tonight's topic, ranks and responsibilities, and should have changed it now. We're actually looking at ranks and appointments. All right, let's go. What do you understand a rank to be? I tell you, don't be shy. So while you're thinking of that, this session objective, at the end of this session, you are expected to know the various ranks of Commonwealth nations, be able to describe the general duties of each rank and appointment, and to develop an appreciation for the relationship between ranks and appointments. All right. And again, we're using the Commonwealth as the common factor, regardless of the fact that you're in Dominica and I'm in Jamaica. Based on our cultural, our shared history and our current military and security structure, we operate using the Commonwealth ranks and appointments. So somebody ready to share what is a rank quickly? So yes, you can go ahead and type it in the chat, or you can just talk it out and tell me what you think is a rank, or what you know a rank to be. And I'm seeing the answer being input. A rank is a position in the grading system in the Army, all right? The grading system. So it's a position, all right? And I like the use of the phrase grading system. So you are ranked based on a grade, and that grade has multiple meanings to it. All right, so let me share with you our working definition for this session. We'll talk about military ranks, and these are a system of hierarchical relationships, the armed forces, police, intelligence agencies, or other institutions organized along military lines. And that last phrase speaks to us. Why it is that we are a paramilitary organization, we are not combat, we are non-combatants. We are non-combatants, as in our primary function is to not wage war in defense of the country. So we're paramilitary, meaning that we adopt, we utilize certain principles or certain aspects of the regular forces. So military ranks speaks to that system, that hierarchy or hierarchical relationships. So in terms of a hierarchy, it says that there are some that are positioned above others. And then there are those who are equal on the same level. The Caribbean cadet formations use two main categories of ranks. So when I say Caribbean cadet formations, I hope you understand, and we must understand that DCC and JCCF are part of the wider Caribbean Cadet Association. Can anybody name another member of the Caribbean Cadet Association? So there's JCCF, there's DCC. Anybody else? Can I shout out the name? I think I can hear it if you shout it. JCCF is Jamaica Combined Cadet Force. DCC is Dominica Cadet Corps.
St. Lucia Cadet Corps.
St. Lucia Cadet Corps. Thank you. TTCF. That would be Trinidad and Tobago Cadet Force. There is the CICC, Cayman Islands Cadet Corps, and there is Turks and Caicos. I know I'm missing out about two of them, but we are all part of the Caribbean Cadet Association. And again, we have two main ranks or two main categories of ranks. Can anybody tell me what those two main categories, and we're emphasizing the main categories? What are two main categories of ranks? If you want to call them classifications or problem, what are they? Yes, man, come closer and talk. What are two main categories or main classifications or divisions of ranks?
Commissioned officers and non-commissioned officers.
All right, commissioned officers and non-commissioned officers. All right, fine, good. We're going to look at them in a broader context, though, as being commissioned officers and other ranks. And I'll soon tell you why. So commissioned officers are leaders and primary source of authority within the service. You will notice I say within the service. So whether it is that we're talking about JCCF, DCC, TTC, it doesn't matter which, a commissioned officer remains the primary source of authority. Please note I did say the primary source of wisdom and knowledge. We are not gods. But within our respective services, commissioned officers are vested with the legal responsibility and authority within the various services. The authority of a commission comes from the government in the behalf of King Charles III. And it is issued through or issued by the hand of the Governor General. Who is the Governor General in Dominica?
So Dominica is no longer part. They have a president.
We have a president. Oh, Dominica is a republic.
Yes, a republic.
Ah, good. You see, I'm learning also. Dominica has a president who is in equivalence would be our Governor General. Because you have a prime minister, right?
Yeah.
So so much like how Trinidad and Barbados have prime minister and president, is the same system, the same thing with Dominica.
Yeah.
Right. And in a couple of years, so too will Jamaica. All right. So, but as members of the Commonwealth, the commission will still be, and in terms of DCC, the officers, the commissions will come under the signature of the president. All right. Now, commissioned officers, there are two main classes of commissioned officers. There are several breakdowns depending on which service you are looking at, but I'm going to look at the two basic ways of looking at commissioned officers, and there are two safe ways of looking at commissioned officers. The first one, a senior officer. So a senior officer is, oh man, I messed up that slide. I apologize. Hang on, I took out that slide. That's why I'm going to correct it. So when I send the presentation, you have the correction. Senior officers. By the way, may I see a show of hands for persons who can name 3 different ranks of officers? If you can name 3 different ranks of officers, raise your hand. All right. If you can name 5 different ranks of officers, raise your hand. All right. Can somebody tell me the first or the lowest officer rank? Let's start with that. Somebody tell me, what's the lowest or the first? Anybody?
Lieutenant.
Say again?
Second lieutenant.
Oh, second lieutenant. All right, good. And then depending on your territory, the senior rank, the senior most rank will be different. But in general, the officers, we're going to look at them broken down into two main categories. And I'll do that also because for DCC, this will be your main division for officers. So senior officers begin at the rank of major. All right. And they are responsible for managing formations that are larger, that include 1,000 or more troops. All right. So that's the size formation that senior officers deal with. I can find that graphic. I didn't intend to use this one, but let me see if I can jump to it. Okay. For senior officers, you will start at major, then you go up to lieutenant colonel and colonel. What's the senior rank in DCC now?
The lieutenant colonel.
So the senior rank in DCC is a lieutenant colonel. All right. So for DCC, your senior officers would be majors and lieutenant colonel. Below the rank of major is a junior officer. All right. Badges of rank. Badges of rank. I hope the names are not on this. I hope the names are not on this. I'm gonna change for a bit. What are you seeing on the screen now? What color are you seeing on the screen? Okay, so I'm seeing what I'm just looking at my YouTube channel. I'm seeing what you're seeing. That's the badge of rank for an officer. Can anybody tell me which rank that is?
What are they? What are they?
Hang on. Sergeant Edwards.
Colonel.
Oh, good. We have other persons in the room now. Well done. So I'm seeing Sergeant Sultan, Sergeant Edwards, and I'm seeing. All right. White is iPhone. All right, cool. So all right. So the image I have on the screen now, that's the badge of rank for a second lieutenant. So for the potential officers in the room, when you complete your training, that is where you will start out as a second lieutenant. All right. For DCC, Edwards, has DCC changed its badges of rank?
No, sir.
So it's different from the Commonwealth standard, or it's the same?
Same.
Okay. So the badge of rank on screen would be a
Major.
right. Thank you, Sergeant. That would be your senior officer, and then no, your commandant would be right here, Lieutenant Colonel. So their
Yes,
response,
sir.
right? So senior officers manage, and their leadership rests at the upper echelons of the hierarchy, where they have to have a more global perspective. The decisions made and the work done by senior officers affect a whole mess of people. As I said, senior officers normally lead formations that are by calculation, by service calculation, you're looking anywhere from 500 to 1,000 or more, upwards of 1,000, depending on one's rank. All right. So in Jamaica, our senior rank is brigadier. Our commandant currently holds the rank of brigadier, and that is where our senior officers, that's our highest rank right now. All right, so we have senior officers, which therefore implies that you, oh, by the way, on screen is a picture of Lieutenant Commander Johannes Richardson. He is, at the time, he was second in command of Services and Support Battalion. I hope I'm not getting this wrong, and I pray that he will forgive me before he shoots me. And one of the things you'll notice that his uniform is different, right? White, black, and you'll notice also the cap badge is different. Those are the insignia, that's the dress code of the Coast Guard and in general of the Navy. You'll notice that on his shoulder, the shoulder boards will look different from what you might be used to. So in equivalence, the lieutenant commander is equal in the lieutenant commander in the Navy or Coast Guard, in our context, Coast Guard, the lieutenant commander would be equal to a major in the infantry. All right. You'll also notice that the sword knot here hangs down low, and that's also something that you will see senior officers enjoy. All right, junior officers, these are second lieutenants up to captains, and in some contexts, you will find some argument that captains are not junior officers or captains are not subaltern, but I'm not debating that tonight. We're just looking at two safe general classifications of officers that will be applicable to your situation. So second lieutenants to captains are junior officers, and they're responsible for leadership within a company. Now, a company is, again, by calculation, a company is somewhere just around 100 to 150 troops. When you build out the other ranks and officers, you get anywhere, and again, 120 would include probably a drum corps or a music section. So that should take you up to just about 120, 130, possibly, depending again on the particular nuances. So within a company structure, you'll find these junior officers operating. And again, that would be second lieutenants to captain. Now, a second lieutenant, as a mentor of mine said, a second lieutenant is in charge of nothing. You're fresh out of school, you're fresh out of training, and while you are commissioned, you are commissioned, and by law you have authority of the commission. In deployment, a second lieutenant is sent to a platoon. And while we're looking at ranks and duties, there is a relationship between the two. They're not viewed independent of each other. Your rank carries certain duties or carries certain responsibilities. It's a scope in which you operate. So second lieutenants and lieutenants are platoon officers. A platoon is currently by the associations or the Commonwealth standards, you're looking at up to 30 persons. And as a lieutenant, you would be the senior in that formation. A company is typically made up of two or three platoons.
Captain, excuse me one moment. I will be stepping out for a few minutes, but there are other persons here. So I'm not in the room right now, okay? But you can carry on.
Yes. All right. So the company is 2 or more platoons. And in practical layout senses, especially in Jamaica here, we used to have it being a company is made up of 2 or more, 3 or more units. We have moved away from that with the restructuring of our cadet force, where now all units are established for a strength of 120, which means that every single unit is its own company at this point. In DCC, you have 8 units. How those 8 units are arranged will be up to DCC and its membership. But in general, once you have 2 or more platoons working together, you have established basically a company. That company is then run by typically a major. And there's a reason for that. It's all about a hierarchy. It's all about responsibility. So if a lieutenant is in charge of 1 platoon, but you now have 2 platoons, how would you look about managing those 2 platoons? If the 2 platoons have to work together and both platoons are led by lieutenants who are of equal rank, what would you logically need to do to have proper management of both platoons? Somebody tell me, what would you think that you would need to do? You have number 1 platoon that has a platoon commander, a lieutenant as a platoon commander, and number 2 platoon also has a lieutenant as a platoon commander. How would you look towards managing that joint formation then? So anyone online there or the man that's sitting there at the screen? Your name is? Yes, man, smile. Nice, yes. What's your name? You are?
Sergeant James.
You're Sergeant James?
Sergeant James.
All right, Sergeant James. And interesting enough, you're a sergeant. Good. So the question can still be applied to you, which is something that I want everybody to understand. There's a relationship between officers and other ranks. Almost for every officer, there is an other rank or an NCO that has a mirrored responsibility and a mirrored scope. So a lieutenant is a platoon commander, but the senior other rank within a platoon is a sergeant, right, Sergeant?
Yes, Major.
All right, so here's my question to you now.
Captain.
You are number 1 platoon, sir. Again? Yes, man. We look about that when I see you in person. All right. So you are number 1 platoon sergeant. And then let's see who is now. Sergeant Sultan is number 2 platoon sergeant. Let's say that both platoons are at some form of gridlock, and they need some form of management. What is this simplest? Who is the simplest person to insert into that situation to resolve and to manage it? Remember, you are both sergeants now. You are both sergeants. What's the simplest thing to put in the mix to automatically arrest the situation and provide some form of mentorship and leadership? Who would you put in there?
Warrant officer.
Say again?
Warrant officer.
You would put in a warrant officer. All right? Simply because a warrant officer outranks both sergeants, right?
Yeah.
Good. It goes the same way for the officers. So for you as a sergeant, 2 sergeants say, just throw in a staff sergeant above you. Y'all have to listen to what the staff sergeant says. And the staff sergeant has to listen to what both of you say, and then find some way to lead you both to an amicable solution. So the same thing with the officers. You have lieutenants who are platoon commanders. They would then need to find somebody. They would need to look to somebody with more experience and a greater scope of authority for leadership. And that is where your captain and major would come in. All right. So again, quickly, junior officers and senior officers. Junior officers are second lieutenants, lieutenants, and captains. And senior officers would be majors and lieutenant colonel for DCC. In Jamaica, we would have majors, lieutenant colonels, colonels, and the brigadier. And it's also important to know your naval equivalents. Please know your naval equivalents. For you, Sergeant, do you know your Coast Guard? By the way, this might sound like a dumb question, but I like my students to ask dumb questions when it's the first they're dealing with anything. Does Dominica have a Coast Guard?
Yes, they do.
All right. Good. Because the Coast Guard would patrol your territorial waters, right? And safeguard your territorial waters.
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good. Woo. It's good to know that we're on the same page. So it's good to know your naval equivalents as well. So again to you, Sergeant, before I ask W2 Samuel, does anyone know the naval equivalent of a sergeant?
Safety of
Say again?
officer.
All right, so the naval equivalent of a sergeant, an infantry sergeant, your Coast Guard equivalent would be the person that wears this rank. It's called a petty officer. I should have shown the bigger one, but yeah, that's the equivalent. So it's good to know them so that you can relate to each other seamlessly and in a sense, in a spirit of brotherhood and oneness. All right. No, that's the officers. So you have junior officers that are responsible. They have leadership within a company, within company formations, and then you have senior officers that have responsibilities beyond the company structure. Then we go to other ranks. Remember, no, there are two general classes of ranks. You have the commissioned officers and you have the other ranks. And the person that answered earlier that says commissioned officers and NCOs, non-commissioned officers. Yes, you are correct, but we're going to broaden the scope and we're looking entirely at other ranks. And as the name suggests, these are persons who are not officers. They are everything else except officers. The other ranks, the authority is subordinate to and or is attached to an officer. Other ranks love to say that officers plan while they do the work. So other ranks affect the plans generated by officers and are generally assistants to officers of equivalent organizational level. So if you take the stack of officers and take the stack of other ranks and put them down side by side, you may just find that there is correlation based on where they are in their at their different levels and what it is that they do. And we're going to look into that shortly. So the first set of other ranks that we're going to look at are the warrant officers. Warrant officers. Right? Now listen carefully. A good warrant officer like Warrant Samuel. A good warrant officer like Warrant Samuel teaches junior and senior NCOs, mentors junior officers, and they juggle a role in the warrant officers and sergeants mess. It's a tough call because warrant officer leadership is the point where you transit from team leadership, where you can know the name of everyone in your company, squadron, or team, to organizational leadership, where you will lead people via intermediate. Now, when I was putting this together, I remembered there's a W2 that I just had from my company. She graduated this year, and it took some doing to have her transit from being the NCO who was intimate with the rest of the formation, where she was literally showing somebody to know them right hand from them left foot, and always hovering around to make sure that things get and actually doing things, to transit to a stage where she was to know, look globally at the bigger picture, not just a single section, not just being down at the section level teaching, but more at the organizational level, where she would be now mentoring a sergeant. So while it is that she had not been promoted to the rank of 002, she was still operating by and large with the mindset of even a corporal at times. So it's a tough call for warrant officers where there's a passion to see the work get done. But they have to look at things at a lot from a wider scope, a wider perspective, and they have to balance out all of this. And that is why now they have to work through the NCOs. It is a job, it's Warrant Samuel's job to mentor all the sergeants and the staff sergeant to make sure that they're on point with their duties. The warrant might share some intimacies with them because they are going to be the ones that the warrant will know, train and mentor. So he'll know their name, know them family, know some career aspirations and stuff like that. But the warrant will not necessarily know that of a private or of an able seaman. No, the warrant will have to spend his energy or her energy thinking about how to mentor the next set of leaders and to make sure the program is managed. So that's the warrant officers. Again, these are not commissioned officers. They receive a warrant from the DCC, from the commandant of the DCC will write their warrant and give them authority within the DCC to carry out their work. Then we talk about non-commissioned officers. Non-commissioned officers. Tell me, what are the ranks of non-commissioned officer? Yes, we know that we have senior NCOs and junior NCOs. Tell me the ranks of non-commissioned officers. I have an NCO sitting in front of the screen right now.
So it would be from Lance Corporal going up to, I believe, lieutenant, if I'm correct.
Up to?
Up to lieutenant, up to the lieutenant.
Okay, all right.
I
So,
believe.
all right, it's a good start. But let me save you a lot by telling you to never call a lieutenant an NCO.
Okay, so my apologies.
Don't worry, you'll get there. All right. So remember now, a lieutenant is an officer, is a commissioned officer. All right. Your non-commissioned officers start at the rank of Lance Corporal. Yes. Your NCOs are your Lance Corporals, your, hang on. Where can I show you? Let's use this one. So I'm going to bring it up on screen. I hope you can see. Let me see if you're seeing. And it's loading on you. All right. So these are currently the ranks of the Jamaica Defense Force, which is the same thing that the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force uses. And it's the same ranks that you in Dominica will use, except where your rank stop at Lieutenant Colonel. So the NCOs begin at Lance Corporal and end at Staff Sergeant. So your non-commissioned officers receive their authority by an instrument called an appointment. You're appointed to the rank of sergeant or staff sergeant, or yeah, that's your appointment. And that comes from the commandant's hand. All right. Here in Jamaica, it's the same. The non-commissioned officers are appointed by a commissioned officer, and your commandant will be a commissioned officer. And the job of an NCO is to supervise enlisted soldiers, or in your case, or in our case, NCOs are to supervise privates or cadets. That's what an NCO is built for. Supervision, training, and ensuring that the privates are taken care of and they are properly trained and they're getting the job done. That's the core duty of an NCO. The NCO therefore becomes the backbone of the service. Without effective NCOs, your officers can't get them work done. Without effective NCOs, it means that the privates who make up the large portion of your service will not have effective grassroots in the trenches leadership. So that's why it's critical that your NCO are properly trained. And again, the warrant officers are the ones primarily responsible for the training and the mentorship of your NCOs. This is how everything is related. So in the grand scheme of things, the officer's plan is the duty, it is the responsibility of officers to plan effectively and always test and adjust to ensure that the DCC's mission is achieved. So those potential officers and officers in the room, that's your job, to ensure that you understand the commandant's intent. And together you develop a training model, a training program. You develop activities and you plan effectively for the execution of those duties. The burden of preparing your cadets to get it done rests with your warrants and the NCOs. So that's how the relationship is. The government of Dominica has a vision for its young people. That vision is shared with the commandant of DCC. The DCC commandant then interprets that and extrapolates from that mission objective, and together with his senior officers, craft a global program for DCC that will last 5 years, 3 to 5 years. The junior officers then take that intent, and from that intent, write a training program that is in line with the commandant's intent to say, hey, this is how we're going to achieve the mission. Here's what we're going to do to ensure that the cadets experience all that it is that the commandant wants, which is what the government of Dominica wants. And when the junior officers at the platoon level and at the company level write these programs, then in consultation, of course, with warrants, who are the technical, and a warrant officer is a walking library. Let me tell you this. A warrant officer is a walking library. Even in their sleep, a warrant officer is to be able to walk you through actually anything that you need to know in the service. Again, that is why a warrant officer is so removed from the local intimacy of one-on-one engagement with the troops, because they have to be in the know, and they are I won't say repository, but that's the group that you look to for guidance in technicalities. The warrant officers form the bridge between the officer corps and the other ranks. They are the bridge. So that is why earlier you would have heard that a warrant officer is responsible for mentoring NCOs and also have the privilege of mentoring junior officers. So PO complete your training, and if there are any second lieutenants in the room, when a newly commissioned officer would do well to get to know the warrant officers. So you're gonna need to brush up on your drill, because I gotta tell you, as a second lieutenant, your drill not ready yet. I can't tell you that. Except that you were in the service as a cadet before and you were a career cadet. Most second lieutenants, your drill not ready. So you need to spend time now. That's where you spend time having one-on-one tutoring with a warrant officer. And that again is why the warrant officer has to be very au fait, very mature, and very knowledgeable of diplomacy and how to treat with instructing and mentoring somebody above his rank and station. All right. Are there any questions yet? Because we're going to move now away from the ranks. I'm going to hit duty and appointment. But you can send your question at any time, please. Let's go. So duty. How many of you like to do duty? Raise your hand. Be honest. You love doing duty. I saw that. Which duty you love doing? Say again, or you want to type it in the chat? So while he's typing that, all right? Or you were gonna say it out loud?
It's a century.
Which one that?
Sentry.
Oh, sentry duty. Okay. I wonder why.
Mostly because I doesn't.
You see, every duty has its particular nuances, and you are responsible for carrying out your duties to the best of your ability. And if you have a weakness, you must seek guidance. Everybody, none of us here is God. So we all have weaknesses. We are not all born flawlessly proficient. And no matter how many years we spend in the service, we are never going to be flawless proficient. So we rely on each other to ensure that we get the duty done. So duties are those routine or specialized tasks to be completed by members of the service. Duties may be ascribed or prescribed. So a prescribed duty comes with, it's what is part of the job description. And an ascription is then something that comes along the way. They might find that you're good at something and say, you know what, add this to your list of duties. So they form the basic description, the basic job description of an appointment. Now, what is an appointment? An appointment is a function, a job. Let me see. I'm still trying to find the word to tell what an appointment is. An appointment, okay, an appointment is similar to a duty. But one of the things that makes it different is that the time scale and the scope. These are two factors that separate appointments from duties. So within your appointment, you have several duties. Good. So think of appointments as duties on turbo. Appointments are fundamentally similar to duties, however, they tend to have longer time durations and broader scope with greater authority. Appointments often have rank restrictions due to the inherent scope of authority. And we're going to look through some of the appointments. We can't look at all of them because there's a whole lot. So here are some of the most common appointments you're going to interact with. And some of you may hold this appointment at some point in your career. I've held, as far as the officer appointments go, I have held a good bunch of them in my 9 years of service. The only one that I have not held as yet is a commanding officer. I am not at the rank for commanding officer yet. Maybe one day, but not yet. So commanding officer, you must have aspirations. So a commanding officer, and I'm going to take it from the top down. Well, I'm going to jump somewhere in the middle of the top and come down. I'm not going to be looking at the appointment of commandant. Not in this session. In another session, I'll probably look at commandant. But I can tell you from now, the appointment of commandant has the responsibility of the weight of the entire DCC is on the shoulders of the commandant. So the commandant has to see the big picture and figure out how to assemble a team and manage a team and lead that team effectively to achieve the mission as gotten from the government of Dominica. So a commanding officer now is responsible for the organization, efficiency, discipline, welfare, and administration of his unit. Point to note, the word unit within the military speaks to several different layers or different levels. So, whereas you might be familiar with the word unit to describe the unit at Portsmouth. While you're used to a unit being attached to a school, the word unit can describe any level of the formation. So within the Caribbean Cadet Association, there's a unit called Dominica Cadet Corps. There's a unit called Trinidad and Tobago Cadet Force. There's a unit called the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force. Good? Within the JCCF, there's a unit called Western Regiment. Within Western Regiment, there's a unit called 7th Battalion. Within 7th Battalion, there's a unit called Marine School Cadet Unit. So the word unit has multiple uses depending on what level of the organization you're looking at. All right. So the commanding officer or the CO is responsible for the organization and the welfare discipline of his entire unit. And within the JCCF, a commanding officer, once you hear commanding officer, automatically you're thinking of a battalion establishment. The unit that's talking about here is a battalion. Now, the command officer must extract from the unit officers and other ranks the most implicit obedience to regulations and orders. So it is the burden, it is the responsibility of the CEO to have that confidence or to elicit or to get out of all his subordinates, that implicit. It means that every man or woman under his command must have that desire to adhere to the regulations and orders of the organization. The CEO must not only enforce by command, but encourage by example and energetically discharge his duties. In another session on leadership, you'll understand that there's a difference between leadership, command, authority, management. You'll learn the differences, and you'll understand why it says that the CEO must not only enforce by command, but enforce by encouraging or by setting example or by having an energetic discharge of his own duties. That's the CEO. CEO should frequently examine the officers, especially subalterns. And the subalterns are second lieutenants and lieutenants. So the CEO must regularly examine them. How are they functioning? Are they managing their units? Are they managing their platoons properly? Do they need help? What are their strengths and weaknesses? The CEO must do that. The CEO is responsible and accountable for all public stores. Everything that the government of Dominica issues to or issues under the signature of the CEO is responsible for that. Therefore, the CEO is responsible to the public, to the Dominican public. A CEO regularly commands a formation designated as a battalion. So again, once a year, commanding officer, just think about one battalion, one large formation. Strength of at least 2 companies. And the required rank is a lieutenant colonel or at least a major. Currently, within my regiment, my commanding officer is a lieutenant colonel. And by the way, my apologies, yes. The picture that you're seeing here, that is my commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel John McKnight. It has been a pleasure to work with him for what seems like centuries. I knew him when he was a captain, and it's a pleasure to work with him and learn from him. And that's what you get from your CO. So I've known Colonel McKnight from the days when he was a company commander till when he served as second in command for the battalion, and he's now the battalion commanding officer. The commanding officers for 4th Battalion and 10th Battalion are currently at the ranks of major. So in the strictest of sense, if you were to write it out literally, they would be called acting COs. But they bear the burden of a commanding officer nonetheless. They are not diminished in their value. They are not diminished in their scope of authority either, regardless of the fact that the ranks are different between Colonel McKnight and Majors Walters and Romans. As commanding officers, they bear the same responsibility. COs are generally given command of up to 1,000 troops. That's in a battalion. I had mentioned earlier that the restructuring of the JCCF now means that all units are company class, which means that there are 100, there have to be 100 infanteers in each unit. In 7th Battalion, there are now 9 units, which means my commanding officer is literally responsible for at least 900 other ranks. And when you add the drum corps establishment to that, he is responsible for just about 1,200 other ranks. Now, the command formation normally consists of a major who would act as his second in command, majors who would be officer commanding companies, You would have a captain who would be the adjutant, a quartermaster, or if they're going to fuse the two appointments together, you end up with an adjutant and quartermaster. That is held by a captain. Then you would have lieutenants or second lieutenant who would serve as an admin officer. A warrant officer class 1 to be his regimental sergeant major, and the warrant officer class 2 to be his drill sergeant or regimental quartermaster sergeant. So the CO has a support staff, and those are the dimensions of the support staff. Second in command, if you're a 2IC, you are basically understudying the person above you. The 2IC is equivalent to a vice or a deputy. So the second in command will assume command of the formation in the absence of the CO. On screen here is Major. All right. Excuse me a minute. All right, sorry about that. So you're looking at Major Elvis Wilson. He's another mentor of mine. At one point would have served as 2IC for a battalion. Currently, he is now holding the capacity of a commanding officer. But as 2IC, second in command is responsible for supervising the training and the administration. That's the core of their function. So while they're understudying or while they're being second chair to the CO, they have to supervise the training. And in our formation, in our structure, the 2IC is also the training officer. So they have the responsibility for designing the entire training program for the battalion. And at the forces level, the training officer is responsible for the entire training program for the whole JCCF. In DCC, your training officer will be the one responsible for your training, even this one that you're doing now, and the training of your cadets. That's the responsibility of a training officer. Again, they're looking only at training. What is to be trained, what they need to get the training done, and the timings, and what includes human resources. So the 2IC is also responsible for unit administration, which would be where now the 2IC is assisting the CO in ensuring that all unit officers are getting the support that they need. Are they functioning properly? So he would be responsible for evaluating the officers. The 2IC is normally at the rank of major, as I said before. Here comes, I wanted to leave one for last, but no, let's do it now. The adjutant. The adjutant is a staff officer of the commanding officer. When you get this handout, you can read it, but let me tell you in a nutshell what an adjutant is. The adjutant is the mouthpiece of the CO. The adjutant, to be an adjutant, you have to understand that you're not your own. Possibly more than any other appointment in the service, an adjutant understand that he is not his own. Every word that comes out of his mouth while he's on duty is never his own. Because in the exercise of his duties, all orders issued by the adjutant in the course of his duties have the authority of the commanding officer. And it's a responsibility that cannot and must never be taken lightly. As an adjutant, responsible for preparing and properly distributing standing orders, force orders, and all orders of guards and fire picket. Now, an adjutant, you'll find an adjutant when you are dealing with, in some formations at the company level, you may find an adjutant, but you're more likely to find an adjutant at a battalion and above. And that's the appointment of an adjutant. On a camp, you will find an adjutant. And in camp, when in a camp, in a training setting, you'll find an adjutant flexing greater, or not necessarily greater. You'll see an adjutant exercising more in a training or in a camp environment, as against in an administrative, purely administrative setting. An adjutant is an administrator. So in terms of an office setting now, the adjutant would be the senior admin of admin in that office. So the adjutant manages the CO's itinerary. So the adjutant must know the calendar of events, what diary, what the DCC's diary is. We're heading into January. The adjutant must know. The adjutant of the lower formations, or let's say, the adjutant for DCC by now would have known what it is that obtains for next year. And the DCC adjutant would have already issued the commandant's diary. So that's everybody in DCC knows that, hey, for 2023, here's what is happening. Or 2023 summer, DCC is planning to go to Jamaica for Caribbean Cadet Camp 2023. It's the adjutant's responsibility to know the COs and by extension the commandant's itinerary, manage his schedule, make sure that all appointments or deadlines are met. The adjutant also supervises the drill and will be responsible for the instruction of junior officers in deportment and general conduct. And that's kind of why I wanted to leave this one for last, because the duties of an adjutant, the responsibility of an adjutant, they are heavy and they're wide. The adjutant is responsible for the office work of the battalion headquarters, including upkeep and safe custody of regimental books, records, documents, and files, and will ensure that all orders are published promptly. Now, if the CO has something that he wants to get out, and the adjutant drags him feet, it means that the DCC won't be advised in a timely manner. Again, it's a humbling appointment where, again, you realize that you are not your own. You represent somebody and you represent the organization in ways that you really don't get to in other areas. Now, an adjutant is assisted by an admin officer. And adjutant is assisted by an admin officer, and the admin officer is the one who takes care of drafting all files. If it is a letter of commendation, the admin officer has to draft it. If it's a letter of reproach, that's the admin officer's responsibility. The appointment of admin. I served as an admin officer for 2.5 years, something like that, at the battalion level, and I've served as an admin officer on several courses over the years. And admin O, you are the office hands and eyes and ears. So an admin O is a communication specialist. In the professional context, they are called action writers. And it simply means that, again, if the CO wants something done, it's the admin O who must draft the document. It's the admin O who drafts the orders. And it's the adjutant who then vets and makes sure that everything is in place. And then issues that under the commanding officer's authority. So it's a relationship. So the admin officer is that part of the adjutant that takes care of the administrative paperwork. Then when it comes on to the adjutant, ensuring that the drill standards and the dress and everything that has to do with the physical competencies of the organization, that is where the RSM comes in. And later on, I tell you the function of the RSM. So, quartermaster. Let's not forget, an adjutant at the battalion level can be a captain. Sometimes in rare circumstances, you might find it being a major. But at the forces level, the adjutant for DCC, the adjutant would be or could be a captain or major. In Jamaica, currently our forces adjutant is at the rank of lieutenant colonel. And that's Lieutenant Colonel Kirk Fraser. He was my QM instructor at one point. Prior to him being adjutant, there was Lieutenant Colonel Simone Foster, who was my unit admin instructor while I was in training. So again, at the company level or the battalion level, your adjutant may be a captain. And where if you don't have of that rank, and a lieutenant might be appointed to act as an adjutant. Similarly, a quartermaster. A quartermaster performs his duty under the supervision of the CO. It is often said that from a pin to an anchor, that's what a quartermaster is responsible for. The Q is responsible for all equipment, every single thing. And by the way, I grew up watching James Bond movies. I love James Bond movies. And one of my favorite characters in James Bond movies was Q. And it took me the better part of 30 years to figure out that he was called Q, not because they just assigned him a random letter, but because he was a quartermaster. Yeah, it took me 30 years to figure that out. Yeah, slow sometimes. So from a pin to an anchor, that's what the quartermaster is responsible for. Now, a quartermaster needs to be someone who has a drive and a knack for accounting, because you have to take care of the receipt and you have to account for physical items, whether it is uniforms. And when you go on certain training, if you're going on the range, yes, it's a Q who has to head up the whole secure store accounting. You have to account for rounds, you have to account for ammunition and for weapons. All matter of accounting like that is the quartermaster's responsibility. Implementing detailed accounting instructions and procedures so that the subunits can account for things at their level. Quartermaster is the officer legally responsible for all equipment issued in the service. Again, a quartermaster is an officer, is a commissioned officer. The rank requirements vary depend on the formation. So the forces quartermaster, DCC may have a captain or a major as quartermaster. At one point here in Jamaica, in the JCCF, our Q at the forces level was a major. Within the battalions, we have Qs that serve, we have captains or lieutenants that are quartermasters. The Q is assisted by the regimental quartermaster sergeant. Remember I said earlier, if you take the stack of officers and put them beside the stack of other ranks, you will find somebody that relates. Here's where we go at it now. So the appointment of quartermaster is assisted by an other rank who has the appointment of regimental quartermaster sergeant. Basically, everything that the quartermaster does, the RQ is responsible for assisting in that, and the RQ will function in the absence of the quartermaster. The requisite rank for RQMS is that of warrant officer class 2. Quartermaster matters at the company level is handled by a quartermaster sergeant, a company quartermaster sergeant, and that is normally at the rank of either staff sergeant, otherwise called color sergeant, or you may have a 002 at the company level. At the platoon level, all quartermaster matters are handled by a quartermaster sergeant who is at the rank of sergeant, ideally. Or you might have a corporal who would act in that capacity, right? The QMS would report directly to the platoon commander. So you are at your unit, you are planning a camp, you need to go in the bush for a weekend. It is your QMS now who would be then telling you that, sir, ma'am, there are 15 there are 15 active members, or there are 25 active members in the platoon, and we have in store, we have a surplus of 10 uniforms. We are going to need maps. We have maps of the location. Yes, we have 6 maps of the location, which means we can issue a map to each section, and the headquarters would have access to the other maps with one surplus. That's the job of quartermaster. That's quartermaster administration. It requires an attitude of diligence, paying attention to the finer details, accounting, balancing things. A Q must also be able to plan, to do meal planning. So you're going on a 5-day up. Your responsibility as Q is to generate a meal plan, which includes a shopping list. Anything that has to do with financing, that's the Q's responsibility. And again, with such a heavy responsibility, that's why you need an assistant. And that's where your RQ comes in. All right. Officer commanding. There are 2 levels or 2 ways of looking at officer commanding. There's an officer commanding company or officer commanding unit. Remember, your unit is a standalone unit. So you'll be an officer commanding unit. But if you're paired or joined with another unit, you become a company formation, and you would need an officer to command that. But the responsibilities are generally the same. The officer commanding is responsible for implementing the CO's policies. So whatever the battalion commanding officer or whatever the commanding officer issues as his policies and intents, it is the OC's responsibility to see that these things are implemented. One of the intents, or one of the policies from our commandant over the recent years is this. Let's redefine, let's get some things straightened out. All camps end. Lights out on all camps is at 2,200 hours. Yeah, I'm saying that's his intent. He wants every camp to shut down and everybody to be in bed by 2,200 hours. Why? And some of us who are traditional cadets found it hard to understand, because we're used to going on camp. Now people don't sleep until 3 o'clock. But in his wisdom, the commandant directed that all camps lights out at 2,200, simply because we're going to be up at 05. Therefore, everybody on camp is given 7 hours of sleep. It is written in the training program that you are given 7 hours of sleep, which is the average time that healthy human beings need. The teens that you're going to be working with scientifically need between 7 and 8 hours sleep each day. So in his wisdom, he directed that, hey, everything shut down at 2,200. We need to abandon the habit of staying up and getting only 2 hours sleep, and then in the day, everybody's falling asleep. Now, as an officer commanding company or an officer commanding unit, it means that when I write a training program or when I'm running an operation, 2,200 hours, everybody on my camp is asleep. Why? Because simply, that is what the CO wants. Simply, that's what the commandant wants. So that's the chain. That's how we make the program work. The officer commanding is responsible for all arms stored, issued, or occupied by his unit or company. The officer commanding is responsible for training his 2IC. And better yet, the officer commanding is responsible for developing a succession chain. It is crucial that we all understand that we are not God. I keep saying it. We will not live forever. And somebody must be trained to take up where we leave off. God forbid, I go to sleep and don't wake up tomorrow morning. is there somebody who can take up from where I leave off? That's something that the OC must have in mind, and all levels of all parts of the hierarchy must have that in mind. You're always training your replacement, just like Agent K did with Agent J, for those who remember Men in Black. An officer commanding unit. And this is where I mentioned that unit has several uses. So again, I keep calling Portsmouth because that's the one I remember, or at Band. The officer commanding unit there, generally, maybe a lieutenant or a second lieutenant, if it's a 1 platoon formation. And for 1 platoon, there are generally 30 persons in that, 30 troops in that 1 platoon. The command formation consists of a sergeant. That's why I asked you earlier, sergeant. As a sergeant, you are 2 IC for a platoon. As a sergeant, you are second in command for a platoon. So you have a lieutenant or second lieutenant as your platoon commander. It is your responsibility to assist in designing the training and overseeing the administration of that platoon. And then you'd also assist the platoon commander in crafting the general policies for that platoon so that they are in line with the commanding officer and the commandant's intent. Officer commanding company. Again, company comprises 2 to 3 platoons or 2 or more units. A required rank for officer commanding company is that of a major or captain. Again, you have 8 units in DCC now. You may or may not choose to operate on a company structure similar to the other forces, but you'll make it work based on your situation, and that's what we want to have. But you're going to need at least a captain at the company level, and that person is assisted by a 002 who would be the company sergeant major, a staff sergeant or color sergeant who would be the CQMS, the company quartermaster sergeant, and then you'd have a sergeant per platoon. Regimental sergeant major. If I could freely choose to be at any rank or any appointment, it would be this, the RSM. The regimental sergeant major is directly under the adjutant. No. In certain formations and at certain times, the RSM is moved and reports directly to the commanding officer. But generally, the RSM is under the command or the control of the adjutant. Again, because of the function of the RSM. The RSM is responsible for ensuring the drill standard of the unit is at its highest. Remember now, one of the functions of the adjutant is to oversee the drill competence or drill standard of a unit. And here's how the adjutant gets it done. He gets it done through the RSM. The RSM will also take close and personal interest in training and conduct of units, ceremonial parades, and guard mount. So you're having, DCC is going to be on parade for Dominica's Independence Day in 2023. It's the RSM's job to design a training program and to ensure that every member on that parade is at the highest efficiency for that. The RSM is also responsible for the welfare of the other ranks. If somebody's sick, if somebody has, and this is where the RSM also acts as a mentor and as a counselor. The RSM will also mentor and teach young officers. The RSM, under extenuating circumstances, will provide technical advice to the commandant. Now, in Jamaica, we have what is known as a forces sergeant major. I'm not sure if DCC will employ that, but the FSM is the senior other rank in the entire cadet force. The FSM, the forces sergeant major, is a senior other rank. And that is why the FSM is allowed that latitude where anything that concerns the other ranks within the JCCF, the FSM can speak and represent that to the commandant. And if the commandant has a particular interest where it comes onto the efficiency or the welfare of the other ranks, yeah, the commandant will tap the FSM and speak with him about it, and then know the FSM will get that down to the units through his succeeding line of regimental sergeant majors. Right? So the RSM will pay particular attention to the training and instruction of recruits. Why it is that the RSM will not be the one there underground teaching recruits. The RSM will pay particular attention to how it is unfolding. So the RSM will be responsible for going around to different formations to see what is happening for recruits training. And where there may be deficiencies, the RSM will then work through the line of succession to ensure that the NCOs get the advice that they need to ensure that proper training is done. And RSM will be at the rank of 001. Historically, it has always been that. Once you're a regimental sergeant major, yeah, you're 001. Junior to an RSM is a sergeant major. And the sergeant major could be at the company level. And the function of a company sergeant major would be to focus on drill, yeah? Drill and discipline. So if you watch those World War II movies that I love to watch, you'll hear them talk about a sergeant major. And at one point, sergeant major was considered to be a rank. And there are certain appointments that are so powerful that you don't even call the man by the rank. So it's not 002 Samuels, it's Sergeant Major Samuels. And it's not, similarly, it's not Sergeant Downswell or Staff Sergeant Grant. It's Drum Major Grant. The appointment is so, this appointment is so respected and revered. And that's why I said earlier, if I could be at any rank or at any appointment of my own choosing, it would be RSM. The RSM is a walking library. The RSM is a walking library. Them often know everything there is to know so that they can provide the guidance too. There was an RSM that I worked with some years ago. He's a captain now. He used to make fun. Well, I was at the rank where I could actually do it. Others of lesser rank would only dream of doing it out loud. He's a very dark-skinned fellow. I kid you not. He's a very dark-skinned fellow. And he actually did it on camp once. It was in the dead of night. There was no light in the area. And he was there talking with somebody. And the person literally turned to complete something that the RSM told him to do. And when the person turned back around, the RSM just disappeared. It was there 1 minute and not there again. If you're familiar with Batman, every time Batman was talking to Commissioner Gordon, and Commissioner Gordon reached in pocket to take out something, figure Batman just disappeared. That's what an RSM, that's what we've grown to know some of our RSMs to be, and that's what that particular RSM was. As I said, it was a very dark-skinned fellow. It scared some persons by accident. We don't know if I intended, but boy, it happened. It just resonated with us. He was standing in the shadows, observing what was happening, and the persons only knew that he was there when he smiled. It's only the light that was reflecting off his teeth that allowed person to know he was there. He was ridiculously silent. He was one with the shadows. But one thing I learned from him, I was platoon commander at the training school when he was RSM. And one thing I loved about him is that he would call us into the, I was a lieutenant at the time, so I'm still a junior officer. And there were second lieutenants there. And even the staff sergeants, he would bring us into the training room and have these discussions. why do we have these things? And it would give us a historical context and walk us through how practical, how applicable these things were. So for a regimental sergeant major, that's the type of person, and that's a responsibility. That's the mentorship. That's the mentorship that comes from an RSM. Right? Again, the RSM is an extension of the adjutant, ensuring that the drill standards of the formation are where they're supposed to be. All right. We're wrapping up now. There are certain appointments that are special appointments. You have specialists. Those specialists are those who are in the service primarily because of what it is that they do. They are not regular. They're not regulars. They will not go through the ranks as infantry officers do or line officers do. When I graduated from officer training in 2013, before we marched on for the passing out parade, they took off one member of the intake. That was the day before, actually. In Jamaica, in the JCCF, what happens for a passing out parade, you have what is known as the top PO. Whoever tops the course is normally given the privilege of commanding the parade. But there's something else too. Whoever is the top PO is normally the first person to be published in the forces order. So sometimes a special order is issued the day before the passing out parade, and that person would have been published as a second lieutenant or as a temporary second lieutenant. And they would march on parade as a full, as an officer, whereas we would still be officer cadets. This particular person was taken off parade completely. When we saw her the day of the passing out, she was a captain. That is somebody that came in training with us for 2 weeks, where we spent an entire year, and this person came in for 2 weeks and came off the parade as a captain. And that's where we began to learn about specialists and special appointments. She's actually a doctor, a medical doctor. Her specialization is in psychiatry. But as I learned from talking with her, all psychiatrists, everybody that specializes has to be a medical doctor from the get-go. So in the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force, she's a specialist officer, and her job in the cadet force is to provide medical support. And where needs be, counseling and psychiatric support as well. On screen, you are looking at the chaplain. This is Captain Roger Shaw. He is one of the force's padres. And the chaplain is responsible for advice concerning moral and spiritual welfare of the force. DCC may have a chaplain, or you have several chaplains. The JCC has a chaplaincy unit that has several pastors in it. In his substantive role outside of JCCF, Captain Shaw is a reverend, so he's actually Reverend Captain Shaw. In Westmoreland here, there is Reverend Captain Everton Brissett. These men are literally pastors in their regular life. And in the Jamaica Defense Force, it's the same thing. You have force padres. There is Reverend Monroe. Well, he was an officer before he became a reverend, but still, he now serves as a chaplain in the JDF. So that's what they're for. And the chaplain, when Roger came in, he was at the rank of lieutenant. He was promoted to captain, I think around the same time I was, or shortly after. But that's their primary function. We have the medic. This was Lieutenant, Second Lieutenant Hall. He is now Lieutenant Hall. And they're responsible for medical services. So you're on a camp, you should have a medic on your camp. This is where the specialists come from. So he's a nurse by profession. And he's with us as a member of the medical unit. We also have lawyers within the service. They're specialists. That's what that's what they're here for. They work in the legal branches, in the legal branch of the cadet force. You have what's called a messing officer. This was me in 2015, I think. Yeah, 2015. I have done duties as a messing officer. I like being a messing officer because there are certain things that you get to do, and yeah, it has to do with food. They have to do with food. So I enjoy being a messing officer. It can be quite sleepless because it means getting up before everybody else and going to bed after everybody else. So messing officer supervises any purchases of goods for men's messes or regimental or canteen funds. Messing officer has to inspect the ration quality. So if you're assigned to be a messing officer, or if you're the other rank that's assigned to work assisting the messing officer, it's your job to taste the food first. If the food don't taste good, you're the one that's going to get blamed. The messing officer is responsible for helping to plan the meals, and they would then give the quartermaster information necessary for the complete indents of all equipment needed to operate the kitchen. So these are some of the more common appointments that you'll have in the service. And one last thing I will tell you, ranks and appointments are not equal, but they are to be respected. I'd asked you earlier, if two platoon sergeants are at odds, let's say you are trying to get your platoons into the mess hall for ration, but only one platoon can be in there at a time. And number one platoon sergeant decides it's his platoon that must go in there first, but number two platoon sergeant said, no, they were there first, and it becomes an impasse. One of the things that gets done now is that you see a sergeant walk up. All three persons are sergeants. What makes this particular sergeant authoritative in the context is that the messing sergeant. The messing sergeant already has the itinerary for the mess that day. He knows which platoon is supposed to be in the mess at that particular time. So even though all three are sergeants, when the sergeant for the mess come and say, yeah, number two platoon supposed to go in for because of them time. Argument done. Here's another instance in which ranks and appointments relate. My instructor told me the story that happened to him years ago. He was the quartermaster, he was the RQ. Yeah. He was 002 at the time. And it was a range exercise, and the information that he had gotten was that no, it wasn't the RQ, it was Q. He was just about to become major, right? The information he had gotten from the armory is that, hey, some of these weapons don't look all that safe. It's not sure that these weapons are in the best of condition to go on a live fire exercise. For drill purpose, fine, but for firing, no. So what he had decided is this. As Q, it was his responsibility to ensure that all equipment are in working condition. And because his team said that them not trust the integrity of these weapons, he decided he's gonna pull this set. Now, a particular commanding officer was in camp at the time and wanted to have his team go out and shoot. But when he was told that these weapons were not going to be issued, he got upset, claiming that his team was being disenfranchised. So he went up to the headquarters and started to make complaints. When he was directed to the quartermaster, who was a captain about to become a major, of course, the CO was leaning on his rank. I mean, he's a lieutenant colonel. How dare a captain tell him, say, the weapon now got issue? A lieutenant colonel outranks a captain by about 15 years. Yeah, about 15 years. In rank level, that's about two ranks separate them, you know. But the fact is, it's a lieutenant colonel talking to a captain. How dare the captain deny the lieutenant colonel? So the captain said, sir, I can understand, I can see that you're upset, but if you have a problem with this, as I said, it's my job as the quartermaster to ensure that all weapons that go out are in the best condition. And my team and I have looked at these weapons that remain, and we don't think they are the safest for the cadets to use right now. If you're still not happy with that, you're free to call the commandant. And of course, the colonel upset that he's a colonel and the captain not deny him, so he called the commandant. And load up the captain to the commandant. The commandant says, okay, all right, I can understand. But the thing is this, the captain is my quartermaster. And if the quartermaster sees that the weapons are not safe, I'm going to trust my quartermaster to make the right decision. So unfortunately, you can't just have to go wait. That's rank and appointment. And that's something that everybody here must understand. And for young officers, POs who are going to become young officers or current young officers, you are assigned to a unit. You have never seen these people in your life before. You are new to them. You go there and you see a sergeant. Yes, you're a second lieutenant. You're a commissioned officer. You have all authority. You are new. You are assigned to them as their platoon commander, and you have the authority. Please note that you're a second lieutenant. You just come into the business. The sergeant has been there long before you. He's in the service a long time. To make matters worse, it's your 2IC. So why it is that you are a lieutenant? Yes. And you are the platoon commander? Yes. Respect the appointment. Respect the wisdom of your sergeant. Don't be all high and mighty that you're the officer, so everything must go how you want. No. Never let that get there. Never know yourselves. I'm a captain. Up to earlier this year, I was in charge. I was a company commander in charge of 5 units. The units had officers. During the course of the year, I would plan everything for these 5 units. My word was law. I was a lieutenant. I had second lieutenants. But I was acting as company commander. So what I say, go. November, I got promoted to captain. Make it worse. Me a captain, no. Anything I say, go. I'm the company commander. During the course of this year, again, the structure was changed so that all units were companies. It therefore means that the second lieutenants at the unit were acting as company commanders. I'm still captain, not true. I'm a company commander. They are still second lieutenants, but they're not company commanders. They're not acting as company commanders. Not because I'm a captain means that I can walk up to their companies and dictate to them what is to be done. No, I can't. Midterm, Ash Wednesday midterm, I had all 5 units together in camp by my order. At the beginning of the school year, this school year, I invited them in for, well, I had planned my own camp, but I was directed to make it a wider scope. So I invited them in. The midterm that just ended for us was Heroes midterm. That was in October. I planned my camp. They planned their camp. I couldn't tell them to not plan a camp. Well, no, at the end of November, sorry. At the end of November, they chose to have a camp. We couldn't tell them to not have a camp because they were acting as officer commanding company. So while by rank I outweigh them, by virtue of the appointment. I couldn't tell him to stand down there, Cam. So we need to understand that regardless of our ranks, we have different responsibilities. We have a duty. And the duty is to ensure that we lead our troops to achieve the objective that our commandant has set. Understanding your rank and your appointment helps make things work out so much better. Remember, as other ranks, you are an assistant to an officer of similar scope. So sergeant, you are a 2IC platoon. That's the same way that a captain would be a 2IC company. Or in a system where your company commander is a captain, your lieutenant may be a 2IC company. So you'll be responsible for training. Work with each other to sort it out. You're designing a training for your platoon, talk with the other platoon sergeant and see how well you can have this correlation, or you can have this symmetry, or everybody moving along the same line. You have the officer who is in charge, who is a 2IC for the company. Yeah. Share your ideas. Remember, it's all about balance, compromise, balance, concede, make concession, give and take. I hope that you'll have a fantastic service. Enjoy the service. Is there any question that you may have?
Nothing. I don't have any questions. I'm not sure if you are cadets have any.
All right. I hope you understood, and some of what I said resonates with you and you find it practically useful. I know that when rubber hits the ground, it's gonna become applicable. All right. I wish for you all a safe night, a restful night, and a fantastic day. Tomorrow you have what, one more day?
Yes, copy.
One more full day of training. Enjoy, and I hope to see you soon. Remember, Caribbean Cadet Camp is coming up in 2023 summer. We are hosting it here. On your map, you just need to look for a place called Clarendon College, and that's going to be our general area of operations for now. And we're looking forward to seeing you the 15th of July to the 29th of July. I'm looking forward to seeing you in person, and I'll be with you again here. And you can find me if there's anything that you need, you want to ask. Any advice is a strong word. Yeah, but if you want my take on something, feel free to reach out to me. And I'll be happy to lend a service. All right. If there be no questions or further questions, good night, everybody.